So have you ever heard of paying someone $1 billion to stop doing their job? It sounds kind of crazy, right? Well, that is pretty much exactly what happened in this landmark energy deal. Today we're going to unpack why the US government paid a French energy giant to basically walk away from two enormous offshore wind farms.
All right, to really get our heads around this, we're going to walk through it step by step. We'll kick things off with the deal itself, what actually went down. Then we'll dive into both sides of the argument, the administration's America First reasoning and the really strong corporate bailout backlash it sparked. After that, we'll look at the real-world impact on jobs, and then we'll zoom out to see the two very different competing visions for America's energy future that are at the heart of this whole thing.
So, first things first, what exactly happened here? Let's get straight to the core facts of this pretty unprecedented agreement.
Okay, the whole story, which really hit the headlines back in March of 2026, revolves around this one absolutely staggering number, about $1 billion. And look, this wasn't some kind of fine or a penalty. This was a direct payment from the US government to the French energy company TotalEnergies. And the big question is, what on earth for?
So here's the deal in a nutshell. The US government essentially refunded the money that TotalEnergies had paid for leases to build wind farms. In exchange, the company completely scrapped two huge projects, one off New York and New Jersey, the other off North Carolina. They also had to promise to never build offshore wind here again. And this is the really crucial part, they had to reinvest that $1 billion directly into American oil and gas infrastructure. It was a very deliberate swap. Out with the wind, in with the fossil fuels.
Well, that, of course, brings up the massive question, why? I mean, why would you pay a foreign company to abandon a major renewable energy project? So, let's unpack the administration's official reasoning, which they've wrapped up in their America First energy philosophy.
The government's whole case for this really rests on four main pillars. They're arguing that this move secures reliable energy, it protects national security, it puts an end to a bunch of legal headaches, and it strategically directs foreign investment right where they want it. So, let's walk through each one of those.
First up, reliability. The administration's view is that offshore wind just isn't dependable enough. You know, the wind doesn't always blow. They see it as an intermittent source that can't provide that stable 24/7 baseload power that they believe American homes, and especially growing industries like data centers, absolutely need to function.
The second argument is a huge one, national security. Apparently, there was a classified Department of Defense report back in 2025 that raised some serious flags. The concern was that these gigantic wind turbines could create what's called radar clutter, which might actually interfere with our military's coastal surveillance systems.
Then you've got the legal angle. See, the administration had actually tried to stop these wind projects before using executive orders, but they just kept getting shut down in court. So by turning this into a voluntary settlement, where the company agrees to walk away, the deal becomes, in their eyes, legally bulletproof. It's a way to bypass what could have been a very long and uncertain court battle.
And finally, supporters of this deal are quick to point out that the money isn't just vanishing into thin air. The contract specifically forces TotalEnergies to plow every single one of those $1 billion back into the U.S. economy, and very specifically into building up our liquefied natural gas or LNG export facilities in Texas and funding new drilling in the Gulf.
But as you can probably imagine, that is only one side of this story. The announcement triggered an instant and frankly furious wave of criticism from people who see this deal in a very, very different light.
Yeah, opponents did not mince words at all. The governors of New York and North Carolina, the two states that were directly impacted by these cancellations, they immediately called it a corporate bailout for a foreign company and just a complete waste of American taxpayer money.
Their case against the deal really boils down to three big points. First, the economic loss. They argue it's killing thousands of potential jobs and pulling the plug on a brand new domestic supply chain for green energy. Second, the cost to taxpayers. They see it as nothing less than a $1 billion gift. And third, the risk. They say this move just ties America's energy future more tightly to the wild, unpredictable swings of the global oil and gas markets.
So what does this actually mean for jobs in America? Because the deal doesn't just get rid of jobs, it shifts them. It creates a really clear economic trade-off between two different parts of the country and two very different energy futures.
So here is that trade-off, laid out plain and simple. The plan cancels a future that involved thousands of jobs up and down the East Coast. Think local manufacturing, maritime support crews, turbine maintenance, that kind of thing. In its place, it creates a different kind of job, mostly concentrated down on the Gulf Coast.
highly specialized, often higher-paying roles in engineering, welding, and energy trading for the oil and LNG sectors. Now, what's so fascinating when you break it down like this is you can really see the different bets being made. The wind jobs would have been more spread out geographically, all along the East Coast ports. The oil and gas jobs, on the other hand, are super concentrated in the Texas and Gulf region. And this just perfectly illustrates the different strategic goals. The wind projects were all about decarbonizing the local power grid, whereas this pivot to LNG is aimed at national exports and projecting what's called energy dominance on the world stage.
You know, when you zoom all the way out, you realize this billion-dollar deal is about so much more than just one project. It really represents a fundamental choice, a literal crossroads between two totally competing visions for what America's energy future should even look like.
On one path, you've got this philosophy of energy dominance. This idea sees maximizing our fossil fuel exports as a key tool of national security, of global influence. And on the other path, you have grid decarbonization. This philosophy is all about building up our own domestic renewable energy to hit climate goals and become truly energy independent. This deal was a very clear, very decisive step down that first path.
So we end up right back where we started, with this really fundamental question. Was this a smart, strategic pivot to secure America's energy supply for the decades ahead? Or was it a hugely expensive billion-dollar mistake that just slammed the brakes on our transition to clean energy? I think ultimately which path you think is right is at the very heart of this entire debate.